What is going on, everybody in the fantasy headquarters and around the world who's seeing this video? I'm actually going to leave this video public for the next 2 days as we break down the Daytona 500 for DraftKings and FanDuel. This is going to be an interesting race. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick from CWE. That's my name on every fantasy site that I play. I am NBA, college football, NFL, NASCAR analyst at Fantasy Headquarters. You can find us on Twitter. Just look for that logo. I wish I was more prepared and had all that information ready, but I'm a bad contractor here. So let me go DFS Headquarters at DFS Headquarters. Hit us up. We're going to be offering this content for free. Otherwise, we're looking at $20 a month. Covers every sport. In our Slack chat, we've got a lot of guys who are extremely intelligent at a number of things. There's really nothing we don't cover in terms of fantasy, but we wanted to give you a taster. You know, this is a big event. This is going to be the biggest NASCAR contest most likely this year. The 500 is NASCAR's biggest race, so it only makes sense. They could try to scale if they're able to, you know, attract a huge client base between now and the Coca-Cola 600 or the July Daytona race. Maybe they, you know, put up another monster contest, but, you know, they're going to start out hot. Daytona is a beast like nothing else. Go back and watch these races. They're typically some of the most exciting wreck-filled races that you'll see. Oftentimes, you'll finish the race with 15 or less cars on the lead lap. So it should be exciting. There's a little bit of a unique lineup build that kind of goes along with it, which we'll touch on. There is a little bit of concern, I think, after watching the Xfinity race today, which was just one of the worst things I've ever seen. Just, I mean, if you want people to show up to races, you have to tell your racers you can't get in a line and run in a line. That people will stop watching that stuff. You can say all you want about the drivers doing what they had to get points, but, I mean, you're a product. You have to make people want to see your product. You can't tell me that the majority of people who went and saw that horrible event went home and felt like they got their money's worth. I didn't even leave my couch, and I felt completely and totally ripped off. And that didn't even have anything to do with the fantasy lineups or fantasy implications. It was just a garbage race where it didn't even look like anyone outside of Chase Elliott was trying at any point in the race. A lot of the drivers commented on the composite body that's being introduced in NASCAR this year. Kyle Busch was on record for saying that he hates the idea because it takes a lot of the skill out of it and just makes a lot of the cars too similar. So there is a chance that what we saw today could happen at Daytona and everybody just migrates to the top line. And really, at the end of the day, I think it's important for everybody to understand it wasn't the top line was fast and everybody went there. It was the top line had 16 cars in it and was pushing everybody faster than Chase Elliott or Tyler Reddick or Christopher Bell, who tried to assemble two at a time in the inside lane. So it's extremely, you could just as easily tomorrow see 16 cars line up in the inside lane and nobody in the outside lane is able to move because they don't have a pack of cars behind them. Typically, here's how Daytona breaks down. You will see a lot of 2-line and 3-line racing. It's a very tight track, so when they get 3 wide, it becomes very dangerous. One little wiggle out of a car, and the next thing you know, you've got 17 to 20 cars that have a significant amount of damage. Personally, I don't see anything changing for this race. The Daytona 500 is not the Clash. It's not the Duels. Those are nice exhibition races, and they're fun to get you in the mood for what the year is going to be like. But at the end of the day, the Daytona 500 is the Super Bowl of racing. I mean, yes, it's not the championship. That's at Homestead. But that race is nowhere near the level of excitement and buildup, oddly enough, that the 500 is. So what I expect to see is some single-line racing because that just happens. But I do think you'll see a lot of drivers because there are a lot more aggressive drivers in the Cup Series. You're going to see these guys try to make runs to get to the lead because the front of the race is the safest place on the track. And you will see accidents. I think we're going to see more of a truck-like race than we will see a Daytona or Xfinity type race, because we've seen this intermittently with Xfinity races in the past where at Daytona the guys just go sit and it's just an unenjoyable race to watch. So with that being said, the strategy, the $1 million strategy for Daytona as it usually goes, is to leave a ton of money on the table when building lineups. I can't tell you how many people I have talked to who play daily fantasy, and they know that I play everything that I can because I'm a degenerate. And I will tell them, at these play tracks, you just have to leave money on the table, because when 20 cars wreck, it's Corey LaJoie, BJ McLeod, DJ Kennington, Casey Mears, all of these cars that are back runners that sit 20 seconds off the pace at Daytona to avoid these accidents because they don't have another super speedway car to go to for the year. They end up with 15, 20, 25, 30 place differential points. And guess what? When you add that to the fact that now the place that they're finishing in is like 30 fantasy points itself, they've got 60-some fantasy points, and your Kevin Harvick's and your Martin Truex's and Kyle Busch's that started 5th, 6th, 8th, 10th, and have wrecked and finished 30th are sitting in negative points. And all the while, if you just listen, these guys running in the back are trying to keep their car clean, so when cars wreck, they build equity with every wreck, and they move further and further up. Truck race, Josh Reaume and Angela Ruch, I don't know how to spell the last name, R-U-C-H. They were like 5% owned, running at the end of the pack. You needed them to be on the winning lineups. I hate to break it to you. So that is the number one thing you have to remember. If Daytona gets messy, it's probably going to be those cheap cars at the end of the starting line. You know, Casey Mears, Tyler Reddick, guys like that, Michael McDowell, who are going to end up on the winning lineups because they've kept their cars clean and they've moved forward. So that's the biggest thing I want to get across. I'm going to do a brief driver-by-driver breakdown because my computer sucks and it's working against me. It won't clean itself off. This Mac's a little bit old. I love Macs. They tend to last better and longer than just about anything else, but this one has definitely, turned on me, so I want to keep it as quick as possible. I will also do like a written breakdown of this with my projections for the race. Expect that late tonight. I'll try to post it on Twitter if I can. Let's start it off. Highest price racer and probably going to be the chalkiest driver this weekend. That's Brad Keselowski, starting 35th. Not only does he have a good reputation as being a good plate racer, he's starting 35th, so he's easily the high. If someone has a projection model where Brad Keselowski isn't the top projected driver, there's probably something wrong with their projections, because he's got the potential to have 30 plus place differential points starting 35th. It's as simple as that. So he might be a guy you shouldn't even fade in tournaments. I might go underweight just because I don't really trust him right now. Like I do Logano and Blaney, but the upside is there. So cash games, he's the guy you start with. In my opinion, there's just no questions about it. In tournaments, you're probably smart to start off there as well. Teammate Joey Logano, 10-4 on DraftKings. I'll use DraftKings pricing. I don't play much on FanDuel. Logano starting 4th, has a much more muted upside. Do think he has a high chance of leading some laps here. I'll have some exposure to him. Kevin Harvick starting 3rd. Again, solid chance of leading some laps here. Fords are strong this week. There's no question about it. They look better than both other manufacturers. But, typically the 3rd starting position averages like 23 fantasy points, because they get shuffled to the back and end up in wrecks. That's just Daytona. Denny Hamlin starting 10th, 10K. I like Hamlin. I know I just got through saying that we want big place differential guys, but Hamlin over the past 5 years has a first, second, third, 4th, and 17th finish. He knows how to run plate races. This is a guy I tentatively have him as, finishing 3rd. He's a guy that I'll probably be overweight on, even compared to the field, and I think he'll be relatively highly owned. But he should be worth every penny. Clint Bowyer running 6th. Boyer's a guy who could definitely win this race, but now we're starting to enter this range of guys I'm a little bit more uncomfortable with. So I'm probably going to have a much lower exposure to Clint Bowyer. starting 6th. Even if he finishes 10th, you're still looking at high 30s in fantasy points, and I think you could just do way better elsewhere. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. starting 5th. He's a wily guy, and he could definitely get out front and lead, and I think he's going to try. But he's got a huge downside, so he's probably going to be like in my lower exposure group. Most of these guys in the top 10 are. Hamlin's the guy that I'm real bullish on out of this group. There's one other guy. I'll get to him a little bit later. Next up, 9,600, Kyle Busch, starting 31st. This is like the one race Kyle Busch needs to win. He's won at all the tracks. I think Busch wants to win at the Daytona 500, but it's tough to say I want to win the Daytona 500 and actually do it. Starting 31st, though, it gives you a really solid floor. So again, you're probably going to want to start your cash game builds with Kez and Kyle Busch. I know they're quote-unquote costly, but you'll be able to easily, build around them this week. Chase Elliott starting 18th. Chase has been an absolute disaster here, but that's always because he's starting near the front, and it doesn't take much. You lose like 10 spots if you start first, and you're already like in late 20s, early 30s, so it's very easy to end up losing a lot of points, and if you get wrecked early, you're going to have a huge negative. But starting 18th, now we're talking about a situation where, if he can get to the front of the pack, he's got a solid place differential upside with winning potential. Definitely a guy that I want to have some exposure to. Eric Almirola, 9,200, starting 8th. In my preview video that we did for the fantasy headquarters, Almirola is a guy that I'm putting a strong. I think he's going to have a big year. He's my number 2 guy. I think Chase is going to be the overall winner this year, but I think Almirola is really going to shock a lot of people. But starting 8th in the 500s is not really, again, it's just not really a great situation. He can definitely do it, so he's a guy I don't mind having some, but it's going to be very limited exposure to because he is a guy who can win this race. He's done very well on plate tracks before. Ryan Blaney, starting 14th, 9K. I think, he's a guy I want to have some exposure to for sure. When I say, have exposure to, a lot of the cars running post 30, I'm going to have 50% exposure to because I want to build as many potential winning combinations as possible. So if I think those back runners are going to be making it to the end, I don't want to just put 10 and 25% to everybody because you're going to have a bunch of exposure to people who really aren't in the best positions just to try to hope to have. There's flat out guys that they can win the race potentially and not be on the winning lineup because they started its 3rd or 4th and only led for 1 lap, and they're going to finish with 45, 46 fantasy points. That might not cut it. But when you start getting into this mid-teens, then you do start seeing, okay, if this guy top 5s, now we've got 10 place differential points plus, a finishing result worth 40-some points. So now he's in the game. So I like Blaney. Martin Truex Jr., 11th, 8,800 on DraftKings. Not nearly as bad as of a plate racer as I think he gets a reputation for. I think a lot of it is he's just been caught up in accidents, and that's Daytona. I think there's 2 kinds of drivers. Drivers that are good at restrictor plates because they're really good at avoiding the attrition that goes on. And then there's guys that get caught up in it. It's not that they're bad because we'll see them. Truex just had a couple of years ago, a race to the finish with Denny Hamlin, I believe. So I'll have some exposure to Truex, but he's probably going to he'll be higher for me than someone like Boyer or Harvick, probably even Almirola, but still probably 15%. Kurt Busch starting 12th, 8,700, former 500 winner, moving teams this year, but he's still a smart racer. Could have won this race last year, but a split-second decision to not make the move he needed to costed him and about 7 other people the race. So I think there's room for exposure to him, but I'd keep him on my lower end. Jimmy Johnson, 8,500, starting 17th. Johnson's going to win this race. I have a feeling. I mean, he's a vet. He's coming off of a year, really not even a year, really 2 years of just being the worst. Then he, gets into Menard and wrecks 17 of 20 cars. Then he gets into Kyle Busch in the biggest what the fuck moment in NASCAR in a while. And, there's serious questions about what's going through his head and is his mind right? But this is Jimmy Johnson. Like, at some point there's going to be a fall off. He might be in it, but he could just as easily come out and win this. So I really don't want to play him because I'm kind of on team. I think he's going to get wrecked more than he's going to win the race, but it wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me at all if we're all sitting here saying, yeah, Jimmy Johnson just won the Daytona 500. So I'll have some exposure. Daniel Suarez, 8,400, starting 23rd. I love Daniel Suarez this week. I mean, I don't know. I hated him so much because he just never seems to keep his car clean. But he's been putting up some decent speeds. I think that he's trying to be an aggressive racer. And like we saw today, if you get around, if you're all running one line and Suarez drops and Chase drops behind him and Stenhouse drops and Logano drops and Keselowski, like they're going to get lines built up. And if you're in the right position in that line, you could very easily end up at the lead of this race. So he's a guy definitely, like, he's kind of like my underdog pick to win this week. I've got a couple of them, but I like Suarez. He's starting a good spot. Eric Jones, the technical reigning Daytona winner since he took the summer race, starting 28th at 8,200. You have to have some interest there. He's a guy who's shown he could win here, and there's place differential upside. So he's in my middle group of probably like 20 to 40%, 20 to 30%, 25 to 30% ownership on him. Alex Bowman, starting second. I mean, the only hope for Bowman in being on the winning roster is that this race is going to have to go super chalky like it did today, and he gets the lead and, leads 30, 40 laps at minimum. I won't have none of him, but he might be like a 1 to 3%er. Kyle Larson, 26th, 7,800. Like, any race we see Kyle Larson 26th, we're probably going to try to bet the farm on him. I have absolutely no confidence in Kyle Larson at this point. Just does not seem to be able to wrap his head around plate races as of late. Just something was wrong with his car this past, I think, in the duels. I don't know, something just doesn't seem right, and he's another guy who seems to be a magnet for these accidents. So yes, there's plenty of upside there with his starting position, and I'm not going to have none of him, but he might be one of my low-owned guys that I am low-owned on because I'm being irrational based off of what I've seen out of him. Austin Dillon, 20th, 7,600. Dillon's a plate race guy that I'll always go to. I don't care really where he's starting. I'll have some exposure to him. It's going to be low because it's kind of close to a top 5 position for where he needs to pay off, but I'll take some chances. Jamie McMurray, 7,500, starting 16th. McMurray is a very aggressive plate race driver. His goal is going to be to start first or last, or finish first or last, because after this week he's going back to the booth, or going to the booth for the first time. But everybody leaving their Cup career is going to want to go out on top. So I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that he's going to give it all the effort he can. There are definitely some questions because when he was running 5th or 6th in the duel race, it just didn't look like his car could keep up. So there could be some long run issues there. Maybe he's not a car that even in the draft can really do enough damage, but starting 16th, if he's running 6th, like, you're going to be okay. You could do a lot worse. Paul Menard, starting 7th, 7,400. Totally underrated plate driver. It seems like he's always in an odd position in terms of, where he's starting at. And 7th place is a really horrible place to start at Daytona because you're not in the front. You're kind of in the part of you're way too close to Ricky Stenhouse, number one. That's never a good thing. But this guy's got the talent to win the race. He's a good plate racer, and he's in that Suarez group of guys who I think could do it. Bubba Wallace, 7,200, 13th. Bubba has upside. I'm just not sure I mean, outside of the Daytona 500, and I don't really think we saw a lot of tremendous work from Bubba last year. I'm sure that is in his head somewhat, so I'm a little cautious on him just because the starting position is a little high. I'd much rather go with, literally, I'd rather go with any of Blaney, Truex, or Kurt Busch in his place. So I'll probably be a little bit lower on the field. Ryan Newman, 7K, starting 19th. I don't think Newman's wrecked in the last 6 500s. That was a stat that I saw somewhere. I think it was him and then Landon Castle have run 5. He ran 6 clean. Castle ran 5 clean races. 19th, again, you're looking at a guy who's a top 5 is totally in the realm of possibility. He's not going to be very highly owned, I don't think. So he's a good guy. I think you can get in a 10 or 15% ownership range that could really pay benefits. William Byron, 6,800, starting first. I think William Byron is going to be one of the last 4 racers going this season. I think he's that good. I think he's going to lead laps. I have him tentatively leading 40 laps here, so that's going to inflate his score a little bit. Very serious questions about how if he's actually able to keep the lead or if he's able to regain the lead. On average, the pole sitter averages 8.2 points at the Daytona 500 over the last 5 years. It's a pretty grim look into the future. If by the off chance we get a race like we saw today and he leads 100 laps, it could happen, but he's in my 1 to 3% as well. Daniel Hemrick, 6,600, starting 29th. I believe he was the one who qualified way too high. I think he qualified 3rd for the duels, and then, or maybe he had the 3rd fastest time, and then he just completely fell apart in the duels. So now he's down in 29th starting position. I think there's a lot of upside there on a good team with Austin Dillon and Ryan Newman, I believe. But I can't remember offhand. The season just started. Give me a little while to warm up. But he's someone I definitely have some interest in with a lot of upside for place differential. Because I think he's in, if you're qualifying 3rd for the running of the Daytona, you've got a fast car. Yes, the duels were a disaster. They was a disaster for all the rookies. None of them did well on pit lane. So I'm chalking it up to that. I'm chalking it up to the idea that, these guys just didn't have a handle on it. And as a result, now we get the benefit of having a potential top 10 car starting 29th. I know he's a rookie, but this is the Daytona 500. You can have 19 cars crash and him finish above 10 other cars in, to win, to finish 3rd, 4th, 5th. It's possible. Like, you have to get, with Daytona, you have to look at a very wide range of outcomes. So he's someone I'll be playing a lot of. Ryan Preece starting 21st. 6,500, it's a fair price. Just, again, you put him right there next to Hemrick. And I just have to take the upside that Hemrick gives you over him. I'll have some, but it'll be lower. Chris Buescher is my favorite driver. That's just I feel like I have to say that because I don't want anybody to hear my analysis and not know that he's my favorite just in case there's any favoritism leaking into it. But he's been a very good plate racer. He's starting 12th, so he's or 15th. So he's kind of in that range where if his name was Ryan Blaney or he had the credentials of Ryan Blaney, you'd say yeah, that's fine. I think you can give him a shot in tournaments. I'm going to give him a shot in tournaments. I don't think people are going to see Chris Buescher at 15 and just say that he's going to fall back. He's a top 20 car, and he is on all of the other tracks. But on plate tracks, I mean, he's had solid top 5 finishes a couple of times, I think in both Daytona races last year and even prior to that. So he's another one of those guys who have the potential to come in with a little bit low ownership, but still have pretty solid ceilings, but pretty scary floors, because if Buescher gets into some trouble and finishes 30th, you're looking at 15 place differential points, which I'm pretty sure brings him down to nothing. David Reagan, 24th, 6,200. I'll take some David Reagan. He's a track restrictor plate guy. And a lot of people are going to criticize me saying that, but I do think that there's guys that are just good at restrictor plate races, and David Reagan is one the July Daytona race. He's won at Talladega before. When you start looking at it and say, well, what other races did he win? And there's crickets. Should probably tell you he's probably better at restrictor plate racing than on these other tracks. Brendan Gaughan, 6K. Brandon Gaughan is starting 30th. This dude is the best. Like, just the best, because he gets plate racing. He'll be aggressive, but he knows when to fall back too. So a lot of times you just end up seeing him finish with these top 15 finishes at plate race tracks. I'll take his 15 place differential points and move on. Right behind him, probably my favorite driver in this entire race. I think he's got a higher probability of staying clean than Keselowski and Busch, and that is Michael McDowell, 5,900, starting 34th. Again, some bad breaks in the duels. Pushed a guy who is one of the best, period, restrictor plate racers to a point where it's hard to not consider him. Like, he's a guy that I might push 70% ownership. If he kills me, fuck it, because if he ends up finishing, 10th, he's giving me 24 place differential point. Like, he's going to be on the winning lineup. And if I have him at 70% and the field even has him at 35, I have double the equity that the field has on this driver. Yeah, it's going in on a race. You're going too heavy on a guy in a race. But, just to try, I'm going to kill some time here, and it's a very awkward position because we're almost done with the list. But when people build lineups, one of the biggest flaws they have is trying to get a little piece of everybody. Well, that shit's just not going to work. It's not, because even though you might end up with a situation where, how do I want to say this? Like, you have a situation where you're going to put yourself in a situation where you have less of an opportunity to have all of the right guys in the right places. If I go 70% on McDowell and I'm right, then I have 70% likelihood out of 150 lineups that all of the other pieces I put around him will match the optimal combination. But if I'm 10% on him, I basically have no chance, because there's 39 other drivers that I have to hope I have the right combination of in 10 lineups. So would you rather, or 15 lineups, so would you rather have 15 lineups, shots to have an optimal combination, or would you rather have like 90 to 100 to 115 or 120 opportunities? So the risk is there, but you're not going to get the opportunity with 15 lineups that you will with 120 or so. So that's why I would go heavy. For me. Not for you. You do you. You figure out what works for you. For me, I don't have a problem going heavy on him. Matt DiBenedetto, 5,700, starting 9th. Matt DiBenedetto is my sleeper driver for the year. I'm not playing him. There's no way. If I do, I will. It'll be 1%. But come on, if this guy had qualified 29th, I would have followed what I said, Michael McDowell with Matt DiBenedetto. But there's just, I can't stomach the little bit of upside that's there for the floor that comes with the guy starting 9th, especially when that guy is not with Penske or Stewart-Haas or Hendricks. I know that's a bad way of looking at it to an extent, because these cars are far more similar at Daytona than anywhere else, but I'm not doing it. Ty Dillon starting 22nd, 5,600. I don't love the upside here. I think he's a top 15 car at best. I just don't think that, you're looking at like 35, 36 points. I just don't think he cuts it for me. So he'll be on my low end of exposure. Casey Mears, 5,400, starting 40th. He's a car in a race where half the people in the race might wreck out. Like, he has 30 place differential upside, maybe more. He's driven before. Like, he can do this. So he's a guy that I think there's reason to have massive exposure to. Landon Castle's in a much better situation, 5,200, 27th starting position. When I say he's in a much better situation, it's this year, not for this race. 2,700. He's a fringe play, because I do think there's some potential like top 15 upside, but not my favorite. Tyler Reddick starting 39th, 5,100. Like, again, these guys just have upside, because if they're around and 20 cars have wrecked, just by attrition, they're going to have a ton of fantasy points. So I'll use Tyler Reddick. Matt Tifft, 5K, 33. See what I said about, You know, basically all of these guys here, from Tyler Reddick, Matt Tifft, Corey LaJoie, Ross Chastain, BJ McLeod, Cody Ware, all of these guys are in my... They have a chance to get 25 place differential points just because they have a car that didn't get in an accident. They don't even have to be good. Cars can suck. Just stay on the track. Don't blow an engine. Just stay on the track. Let everyone else run into each other, bust each other's cars up, run 20 seconds behind the pack like you're going to, and you're going to end up on winning lineups. But you just have to be warned. It's very highly unlikely that all of these cars are going to make it. You're not going to see a lineup that's Tyler Reddick, Matt Tifft, Corey LaJoie, Ross Chastain, BJ McLeod, and Cody Ware as the winning combination. It's just very highly unlikely that's going to happen. One or more of those cars are still likely to get caught up in something or just die. Parker Klingerman, 4,500, starting 25th. Parker Klingerman is a good driver. Would not surprise me if he top 15s this. Again, he's in no different position than a lot of these other guys. I have a feeling he might be a little more aggressive, though, and that can be a bit of a negative at Daytona if you're not really a powerhouse driver and team. So all things considered, I'd say for this race, you know, I'm definitely putting a lot of stock into Brendan Gaughan, Michael McDowell, Casey Mears. Those are probably like my cheap plays that I really want to have exposure to. I like Brad Keselowski and Kyle Busch. I just have like... They're going to be very, very, very highly owned, so there is equity in kind of shorting that side of them because compared to the other guys I mentioned, I think there's a higher likelihood that they're involved in some scrape-ups, which means they don't get to see their ceiling. So I'm going to play a little bit more risky with my money. I have no problem with that. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who do NASCAR DFS and will tell me I'm batshit crazy for shorting Kez, I'm batshit crazy for shorting Kyle, and I'm not going to play cash for Daytona this week because I don't want to risk picking the wrong cars that didn't get into, you know, I'm going to end up picking the back runners that get into accidents, and I'm not trying to lose money because I took the wrong coin flip in cash games. But in tournaments, you're building yourself equity. If Keselowski's 55 or 60% owned and you've got him at 25, when 60% of other lineups fall and die, you've still got 75% of your lineups going. God forbid it happens to Kyle Busch too. Now you're talking about a high likelihood that since you probably have 5% of lineups that are Kez and Busch, you probably have 80% of lineups that are still to the good, or 70% of lineups, whereas the field at this point might be 5 out of 6 cars on 85% of lineups. So you do have to kind of look at it that way. It's a battle I'm willing to wage. If Keselowski wins the race and he's on every winning lineup, hopefully my 25% happens to have the right combination of guys around Keselowski. All right, that'll be it. Like I said, I'm going to do my best to sit down now and type out some more formal notes on each driver and just, you know, do a little bit of a broader take on things. This was widely I like to work off my mind, so I don't write stuff down for videos because I know what I want to say anyway. Hopefully you'll give us check us out, you know, next week. I hope this is gonna go well. This is how it should go. I mean, this is Daytona strategy that we're bringing you. So I would say, if you do well this week, give us a shot. $20 for the entire month, every month. And you get access to all sports. And we've got guys constantly taking down soccer contests, hockey contests, college football when it's going. We've got guys winning in the NBA. Like, we're winners here, okay? So come join the team. Again, that's at DFS headquarters on Twitter. Make sure to hit us up there. I'm at Nick from CWE, and thank you so much for joining us.